just messing up the whole system here. I'm going offline shooting.
All right. So what I found out is that there's different layers. And so let me back up a little bit, and you can track on this study on here. There's different layers to Revelation, and that's what this whole study is about, is it's going to show you the different layers. And once you see the layers, you see how the layers overlay each other. And so there's going to be the Roman beast layer, there's going to be the 7 churches of Revelation layer, the trumpets, bowls, the trumpets, seals, trumpets, and bowls layer. So we'll see that in 1 minute. But to start, Revelation. I can hear talking in the background, so whoever's talking in the background, can you mute yourself? That might be.
Sorry.
No worries. It just throws my head off, and I'm easily confused. So the studies in Revelation build on the narrative of Daniel. And so to understand Revelation, and we're not going to go through Daniel in detail tonight, but in order to understand, a lot of people say, well, I don't need to read the Old Testament because I got the New Testament because I'm a New Testament Christian. And the problem with that is the answers to Revelation are in the Old Testament. So you have to understand Daniel and the beast that Daniel's talking about in order to understand Revelation. So I don't know if you guys have gone through Daniel 2 and Daniel 7, but they're describing the same 4 kingdoms. And a lot of people will say, well, Daniel 2 is describing 4 kingdoms, and we know those, and then Daniel 7 is describing Daniel 7 is describing 4 different kingdoms, which are end times kingdoms. But you're going to see in a minute that that's not true. It's the same 4 kingdoms. So you can see the statue, and tell me if I'm saying stuff and you can't see it on the screen, please let me know. But you see the statue, and right here, and the head of gold in Daniel 2 is the same thing as the lion of Daniel 7, and that was the empire of Babylon. And the kingdom of Babylon was strong, courageous, fierce as a lion. The king was humbled, and his wings were clipped by the Medo-Persian Empire, and that's the description in Daniel 7 of a lion, and his wings were clipped. The chest of silver in Daniel 2 is the bearer of Daniel 7, and that's the Medo-Persian Empire. And the Medo-Persian Empire was like a bear. Their strategy of army was just to have huge armies, up to 1.5 million people, and they just overwhelmed their enemy with their size. Persia was the stronger of the two. So in the prophecy, it says, the bear was raised up on one side. Well, that means Persia was stronger than the other one. And it had 3 ribs in its mouth, and those 3 ribs were the dominions that they conquered, which was Babylon, Lydia, and Egypt. The waist of Daniel 2, so the waist of Daniel 2 is bronze, and the leopard of Daniel 7, that's the Grecian Empire. And so it's describing Alexander the Great and his Grecian army, and they were smaller. So their military strategy was to be smaller, to be agile, to move like a leopard, and to get into places really quick and take control. Alexander the Great died at a really young age, and he had 4 chief captains who, when he died at a young age, took over the kingdom. So it talks about 4 wings, and it's talking about those 4 captains who became the head of his empire after his death. And then you have the iron legs. Of course, you have 2, they're split. So those represent the same thing as the dreadful beast in Daniel 7, which was the Roman Empire. And it basically was the strongest of all of them, as iron is, and it trampled everything in its path. It was obviously the power that was in charge during Messiah's ministry. It was used to desolate Jerusalem, the temple, and the Jews in 70 AD, but it was different. The passage says it's different because it was a church state. So the Roman emperor was titled as Pontifex Maximus. He was the leader of the church and state, so it was different than the previous ones. So those are the 4 kingdoms. Does anybody have questions about that? Does that make sense that they're describing the same 4 kingdoms and that the last kingdom is Rome?
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
Yes, makes sense.
Okay. So Satan knows the Bible too. So Satan knows the prophecy in Daniel. He knew that Messiah was going to show up in 27 AD as far as when he started his ministry. So that meant he was going to start his ministry at age 30, which that's the age they would start their ministry. So that meant Messiah was going to be born in about 2-3 BC. So he knew he had Herod in place, who tried to kill the baby, obviously, to wipe out. They killed all the children to try to wipe out the child. He used the Jews to deliver up Messiah to be killed. And then after Messiah rose again and its church exploded, then Satan used the Roman Empire to try to wipe it out. So we know, Rome is the one that was in power. But when you read Daniel 2, it tells you about those kingdoms, but it also tells you that the Father would set up his kingdom during the beast reign. And a lot of people will say, well, that happens at the end of time and that's the kingdom. But really, Messiah set up his kingdom during his first coming. So he came here to set up his kingdom. And during the reign of the Roman Empire, the kingdom blew up. So it started from 12 people and it went to millions and millions of people. So in the most fierce beast of all, the Roman Empire, Messiah's church was blowing up and it was just growing to no end. And so Messiah was establishing his kingdom at the same time, and you're going to see that played out here in a little bit. But something to note, which I think is fascinating, is the prophecy, Messiah said in Matthew 24, the Olivet Discourse, that the temple would be, the whole beginning of that prophecy is that the temple was going to be destroyed. In Matthew 23, he had just berated the Jews. He said all the righteous blood is going to come upon you. And he berated them and said, woe to you, woe to you. And then here he says in Matthew 24, here's the temple, I tell you it's going to be destroyed. And so the whole context of the Olivet Discourse was that the disciples were asking him, okay, well, when's that going to happen? And what's the sign? So, so that sets up the narrative. And I kind of lost track of where I was at, but he had to remove basically everything that the Jews were fulfilling. And so what that means is that the Roman army in 70 AD removed the Jewish high priest, because Messiah is our high priest. And you can't have two high priests. So you can't have the Jewish high priest in the physical temple and also have Messiah as our high priest. He removed the Jewish leadership system. So when the Romans destroyed Jerusalem and the temple and everything else, there went the Pharisees, the Sadducees, all that stuff. So their leadership system got destroyed. And who is the leadership now? Who are the priests now? Well, that's us. That's the early church. We're the priests of his temple. And he removed the temple. As the body of Christ, we are the temple. So he removed the physical temple, and we are the temple. We are the temple where God, where Elohim dwells. Does that make sense?
Yes. Hallelujah.
Yeah, I just think it's fascinating that Messiah really, everything he's fulfilling, every single thing he demanded of the Israelites and the Jews, he's fulfilling. Everything. And that includes becoming the high priest, and we're the temple. Everything's fulfilled in us. And I won't talk about it now, but people talk about the Ezekiel temple, and that still needs to be rebuilt. I would argue that we are that temple. So it's never going to be a physical temple. Elohim's never going to occupy a physical temple again. He occupies us, and we're the temple, and Messiah is the cornerstone, and the apostles are the foundation, and we're the little stones that build up the wall. And we are the temple. So that is the fulfillment in my mind. So one of the points to make on this, just to close up the Daniel part, is the beast of Daniel, or Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. And it's telling us on the statue, if you look at the statue, there's this stone that at the end of time, that stone is going to hit the iron clay feet. And the iron clay feet we'll get to in a second, but it basically represents Rome, which is the iron. It represents Muslims, which is the clay. And those are the two primary powers right now that oppose Messiah and his church. It's Rome and it's the Muslims. So the statue's telling us right there that in the end, that stone's going to be cast down at those two, and they're going to be destroyed. So what it's telling us is that those two are going to be in power until the end. So we know that. So we know that Babylon's gone, Medo-Persia is gone, Greece is gone, and the Roman Empire, the legs are gone. So now we're in the feet, and that's going to be destroyed. So we know it's telling us that's what's going to endure until Messiah returns. So it's not the Jews in Israel. It's not all the things that people make up about what is the beast. It's telling us right there, it's the iron clay feet, and we know the iron is Rome. So one of the goals of this document and this lesson is to show you what the fulfillment is, so you know what's false. So when people are making up stories about what the beasts of Daniel are, you know the real story and you know who they are. So that sets the narrative. So John picks up the narrative of Daniel. So John, you're going to see this played out. John's going to pick up that theme and run with it. And when you look at Revelation in its simplest form, it really is the narrative of the historical battle between the Satan-empowered Roman beast against Messiah and his church. That's it. That's all Revelation really is. It's the battle of the great city of Rome. So the great city of John's day was Rome, home to the Roman beast, against holy Jerusalem, which symbolically represents the bride of Messiah. That's the great battle. But John wrote it when Rome was in power. So John can't say things like the Roman Empire is going to collapse. He can't say that the popes of Rome are going to take power when the Roman emperor is removed. So he's got to hide the message. So it's a war manual, and he had to hide the message. And so he did that with symbols, and he did that with layers. And so you're going to see both those, the symbols. And here's the irony, again, is the symbols are all defined in the Old Testament. So it really is, it's the test. So if you don't read the Old Testament, which many Christians don't, if you don't read it, then you don't, that's the dictionary. And that's where the words are defined. That's where the symbols are defined. So like we talked about last week, the locusts of the fifth trumpet of Revelation. Well, the locusts are defined in the Old Testament as Arabs. So when you read in Revelation that locusts are going to come for 5 months, it's talking about Arabs. It's not talking about grasshoppers, right? So it's using symbolism to show you, to talk about literal fulfillment. Does that make sense? I always need someone to say yes. I hate listening to my voice constantly, so
Yes.
just talk to me.
Yes.
Yes.
I really,
Perfect.
this is so hard for me, I got to tell you, because it's just me talking, and usually I'm just like, if I'm in front of someone, then they're shaking their head, and I got them in front of me, and yeah, it's just hard. So whatever, I'll continue.
And shake
What's that?
nodding our heads.
Okay, yeah, see, we need that visual, right? So what I found to be true is that Revelation is layered. And what's the amazing part, and we can get into more details, but you're going to see a lot of it tonight. You're going to see how all these layers interrelate. And once you see this, you'll get Revelation to a T. And then here's what drives me crazy, is that this is the explanation of Revelation right here on one page. So that right there is Revelation. And here's the deception. If the church understood this, if the church could guide people to the explanation of this, they could prove to the world that the God of the Bible is the one true God, period. Because there's no way you write this document in the first century and all of this is fulfilled in precise detail. It proves without a shadow of a doubt that he's the one true God. But the Jesuits of Rome caused everybody to look to a future explanation. So everybody's looking to a future, Antichrist and a future fifth trumpet and a future all that stuff. So they can't prove any of that. Obviously, it's future. You can't prove anything. And actually, people sound crazy because they're telling stories about locusts showing up or whatever. So that's the deception of Rome. And so I'm hoping, to be able to get this message out to people so they can see the fulfillment and share it with enough people that they wake up and know this is the one true God. So the narrative of Revelation, there's 4 basic timeline sections, and one is Revelation 2 to 3, where, and I say Lord, I mean Messiah, and I use proper names, but in the study I use, Lord God and different things because it's appealing to those people who don't maybe use the Hebrew names. So Revelation 2-3 is about the 7 churches. It describes 7 churches. Most pastors will say, well, that was just 7 churches back when, and that's true. But Messiah coded it in a way to reveal some things to you, and you'll see that in a minute. And so it describes 7 church eras, which have spanned from when John wrote Revelation until today. And sadly, we're right here. We're Laodicea, which, Messiah describes as wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked. And that's, look around, that is us to a T. So Revelation 12 and 13, our Lord gives sweeping overviews of the 3 phases of the Roman beast. So that would be the Roman Empire, then the Roman Catholic Church, which reigned until 1798, and the Jesuits of Rome who took over the Vatican, and they control the Vatican. So you have the 3 phases of the Roman beast. Revelation 17-18, Messiah has given John a vision to try to help him comprehend what he's seeing and be able to describe it. And basically in Revelation 17, it's talking about that they would have colors of scarlet and purple. They would have the golden cup. There would be a harlot, meaning they're apostate, church. He's describing the Roman Catholic Church, obviously, but he's trying to help him get the vision of helping them see how the Roman Catholic Church, how the popes of Rome rose up out of the Roman Empire. And then the seals, the next layer is the seals, the little book of Revelation, the 2 witnesses, the bowls, the Battle of Armageddon, one world government, and all that. So it all overlays. So before I go through the Roman beast, anybody have any questions?
No, yes, that's one.
Yes, give me a question. What? Did you have a question?
Hey, I got a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got one.
Okay.
So earlier you said that Arabs are mentioned as being locusts. I wonder if you happen to know where that scripture is or where it comes from.
Well, yeah. So, and I won't go into it now, but if you go to this amazing website called ChristianityBeliefs.org, and you go to Islam and Bible. I mean, the best place is going to be Islam, and it's in other places, but the best place is Islam and Bible prophecy, because obviously it's talking about that narrative. So this is going to give you the generic description of it, and then here is Daniel 2, iron clay feet, and that's going to answer your question.
Okay, great.
And it's right there.
I've never heard of that website, David. Christianity.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? Yeah. So, and to answer your question really quick, it's right here. So Daniel 2 is saying, the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay, partly of iron. So we know the iron is Rome. Kingdom will be divided, yet the strength of the iron will be in it. The toes were part of the iron, part of the clay. King will be partly strong and partly broken. It's mixed. So it's saying, you saw the iron mixed with miry clay. They shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave to one another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. Well, the interesting part, and I saw someone teaching on this the other day, and they were teaching it was, what did they say? I think they were teaching it was Christians, because we're the clay. Like Jeremiah has verses that were the clay, so he was saying it was Christians. I'm like, okay, but you can see right there, if you look in the Strong's Hebrew word for mixed, both mixed and mingle, right? So it's saying that they're mixed and that they mingle. The Arab, it's 6151, and the word is Arab. And here's
Really?
and here's the proof. Here's what you look at. Okay, so I have this theory. We'll just say, well, that's just a great theory you got there. So it says Arab. Well, that sounds great, but what you look at is look at the whole narrative, and you're going to see this played out in a minute. The testimony of Alberto Rivera, who's an ex-Jesuit, testified that the Roman Catholic Church basically wrote the Quran. They propped up the illiterate Muhammad as the prophet, and they created this religion. And basically, and we'll get into this in a sec, but they didn't have an army. The Roman Empire had fallen apart. They didn't have an army, so they were going to use the Arabs as an army to go kill the saints and kill Jews, to go conquer territory, and to go capture Jerusalem. And so so you see this whole narrative, and you see through history, the fifth trumpet, we'll get to that, is the rise of Islam and Muhammad. The sixth trumpet is the rise of the Turks and the Ottoman Empire. The sixth bowl is the drying up of the Ottoman Empire. So right there, you can clearly see there's a relationship between the Roman Catholic Church and that. And so if you go through these studies, I mean, you'll get into, there's been battles. So throughout history, there's been battles, so they don't get along. Just like the text said, they won't always get along, they won't mix well. Well, they didn't, because the Muslims wanted to take more territories and the Roman Catholics fought back. You see the Fatima Mary connection. So Fatima is the daughter of Muhammad, and they tie in Mary together. So now you got a connection there. You see the faked war on terror, where the Jesuits control most Muslim countries like Saudi Arabia and all that stuff. They control ISIS, they control Al-Qaeda. So you still see the relationship. It's right there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So history proves prophecy. So history proved that this explanation is right, which is just so that, and we'll see that played out here in a minute. So let's see. So again, the basic. Mind my way around here. There it is. So the basic layer that I start with is just the Roman Empire, because that's when it was written. And Satan used them to try to wipe out the early church. So if you're following along, the early church was the woman. So Revelation 12, if you remember, talks about a woman who gave birth. And basically she was given birth to the early church, and she was given birth truly through the apostles to the scriptures, which were caught up to heaven. So here's the Roman beast. Satan controls the Roman Empire. Satan is exalted in the Roman Empire. He in the heavenly realms, not in heaven above, but in the heavenly realms where spiritual things are battled and all that, he is at his height, because they're a pagan culture and they're sacrificing humans to him. They are worshiping pagan gods. Their sun worship. It's all bringing glory to him, and he's at his height. And Satan used that Roman Empire to try to wipe out the early church, and they killed 10 million saints. And this narrative plays out through, you'll see dates down here then. So there's significant dates with 313, which you'll see played out here in a little bit, 476. And so the last Roman emperor was removed in 476. Let me put that up to keep you focused. I'm just trying to help you out. Just trying to help, man. Just trying to help. Yeah. So the last Roman emperor was removed in 476. After that point, the Roman Empire split into 10 civil kingdoms. And I want to show you something really quick before I do that. I might have to look it up. But I want to tie something together, which is kind of in your head, syncs everything up. So if you look at Daniel, let me go to 100%. So look at Daniel 7. It's talking about the fourth beast, and it's talking about the Roman Empire. And it's saying that it was diverse from all the other beasts. It was a church state, and it had 10 horns. Okay, so it has 10 horns. And I considered the horns and beheld, and there came up among them a little horn, who plucked out 3 by the roots, and beheld in this horn, the little horn, were eyes like a man, and a mouth speaking great things. So the last Roman emperor was removed in 476. The Roman Empire split into 10 divisions, 10 civil kingdoms. So that's your 10 horns and your 10 toes. So on the statue you have 10 toes. On Daniel 7, you have a beast with 10 horns. And this little horn grew up and had eyes like a man, because it's the Pope, and the mouth spoke great things, because that's what the Pope has done. And that Pope made the 10 civil kingdoms bow down to his authority. And the 3 kingdoms that would not do that, who are the Vandals, Ostrogoths, and I always forget the other one. I'll get to it in a sec. Ostrogoths, Vandals, and we'll get to it. They plucked them out. So the popes of Rome caused those 3 civil kingdoms, the governments of those, to cease, because they would not bow down to the authority. So Daniel's sitting there pointing to the Roman Empire. So he's saying here's the diverse beast. And then he's also pointing to the popes of Rome, because he's sitting there pointing to the little horn who rose up among the 10 civil kingdoms of Rome and took control. And then here he's saying, the vision of the Son of Man coming in the clouds and establishing his kingdom. But here's the interesting part. So now here's John picking up the narrative. Revelation 12. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon the heads, and those have meanings. Revelation 13, which is describing the Antichrist beast of Rome. So here's Revelation 12. So it just said it has 10 horns. And then Revelation 13, which is the Roman Catholic Church, which reigned for 1260 years from 538 to 1798, it says, and I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise out of the sea, and sea, water, and prophecy as it points to people. So it rose out of a great group of people. Well, what did it just rise up out of? The 10 civil kingdoms of Rome. So it just rose up out of Italians and, everybody in Europe. So it rose up out of the sea of people having 7 horns, or 7 heads and 10 horns, right? So we see the direct relationship between Daniel and Revelation. So does that make sense that John's picking up on that narrative?
Yes.
Yes.
I know you're going to answer. I'm going to ask you a question where you guys have to answer no. I'll have to rephrase.
We're nodding head.
Just so agreeable. I need a challenge. Anyway, so that's the basic layer. So you can see that fulfilled. So here's the narrative of the Roman beast, which is basically Revelation 12. I mean, there wasn't chapters back when the scriptures were written, but it divides it up. So 12 and 13 overlap. But it's telling you the narrative of the Roman Empire, which split into 10 civil kingdoms. And then the little horn of Daniel rose up, and then here's the reign, the 1260-year reign. So there's a lot of different things that point to the popes of Rome reigning for 1260 years. So let's look at that. Let's see. See, I even have to find my way around my own studies. I don't really know. That might not be here. But basically everybody, Daniel, and so the study's in order. So that's what I should have told you, is it's basically in order. So it's describing, they're all describing the same thing. So I want to show you this, that they're describing that the popes of Rome. So Daniel, Paul, and John all describe the popes of Rome. So Daniel 8, and there in this horn, the little horn, were the eyes of a man and a mouth speaking pompous words. 2 Thessalonians 2, who's describing the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God and is worshipped, that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. So he's speaking pompous words and blasphemous things. Revelation 13, and he was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and he was given authority to continue for 42 months. So they're all telling you the same thing. Daniel is pointing to the popes of Rome. Paul was pointing to the popes of Rome. In Revelation 13, the sea beast is pointing to the popes of Rome. And in the 1260 years, so Daniel 7:25 says, the saints will be given into his hand for a time and times and half a time. So a time is 360 days, 360 years, so 1 day equals a year in this case. So 360 years, times would be 2 years, so 720. Half a time is 180, half a year. Add that up, it's 1260. Revelation 11, describing the 2 witnesses. And it's saying that the court, which is without the temple, leave it out and measure it not, for it is given unto the Gentiles. And the Gentiles are the apostate Roman Catholic Church. And the holy city, which is Holy Jerusalem, which is Messiah's church, they shall tread underfoot for 42 months. So 42 months is, again, 360 days a year. That's 1260 years. Revelation 11, 2 witnesses. Once again, it says 1,203 score. 3 score is 3 times 20. So it's 60 again. So 1260. Revelation 12 again says time and times and half a time. And then Revelation 13 says, I'm going to make war with the saints. It's going to continue for 40 and 2 months, which again is 1260. Why? Why there's so many different ways to describe it, I can't tell you. But once you see that Daniel's talking about the 12 same, they're all talking about the same time. They're all talking about the popes of Rome reigning for 1260 years from 538 till 1798. So what happened in 538? Let's get back to our chart. So in 538, Eastern Roman Emperor Justinian gave the popes of Rome civil and ecclesiastic power. So he basically said, you're a church state, and took the power. And so they took for themselves, they later took the title of Pontifex Maximus, the head of church and state, and the deadly head wound was healed. So that's significant because a lot of people say the deadly head wound occurred a lot later, but if you notice something, in Revelation 13, when it's describing the sea beast, it's describing the deadly head wound up front in the narrative, not at the end of the narrative. So what that's telling you is that event happened early on in the history of the popes of Rome, not at the end. And so the head that John's referring to was the Roman emperor. That was the head. Who was the head when he was in power? It was the head until 476 AD, until they were taken out by the Heruli, which we'll see here in a little bit. So the Heruli, led by Odoacer, I guess, captured him and took him out of power. And so the popes of Rome took the power, ascended up in power, and they took the pope, the title of the Roman emperors as Pontifex Maximus. So the deadly head wound was healed. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the popes of Rome, again, sit in the temple of God amongst Christians, the Christian church, proclaiming to be God, proclaiming to be Christ in the flesh, proclaiming to forgive sins, and proclaiming to provide salvation. So they did, during that 1260 years, they did all the things that was foretold about them. They were going to speak blasphemous things. They were going to proclaim to be God. So they did all those things. Those are already done. See, the deception is people point to the future, and the future one-man Antichrist is going to do all those things. And of course, he hasn't, that's yet to happen according to the futurists. But if you look at history, that's already happened. They've already made those statements. So they've already proclaimed to be God. They've already said, when him sitting in the temple of God, well, we are the temple of God. So what does that mean? He's pretending to be a true believer. He's sitting amongst the true believers, and he's proclaiming to be, the leader. He's proclaiming to be God. And they've actually made those quotes. So there's quotes on the website that they say, I am as God. I am God. I am Jesus Christ in the flesh. And during that time, during the Dark Ages, during the Inquisition, they killed over 50 million saints, which is just apparently all swept under the rug now. I mean, they admit it. They say, we're sorry. Like, I think the Pope last week was talking to the Protestant churches saying, are sorry. We're bad. Our bad. We're sorry. 50 million people that they tortured and killed. And now they just get to say, we're sorry. Won't you come back and join us again? That's what's going on right now. So they endured, and we'll see this played out in the above narrative. In 1793, the Pope removed the Jesuits' power. So I should back up a little bit. They empowered the Jesuits in the 16th century to counter the Reformation, and that led to the Inquisition. That led to deceptions that they created about the seventh week of Daniel, about futurism. That all the things are going to happen in the last 7 years and such. That was all created in the 16th century to counter what the Protestant reformers were saying, that the popes of Rome were the Antichrist beast. So they had empowered the Jesuits.
I think everybody.
There he is.
Hey, so the popes of Rome had taken away the power of the Jesuits in 1793. And the Jesuits had actually been kicked out of a lot of countries, even primarily Catholic countries, because they were subverting those countries. So the Jesuits were known as a bad entity back then. They had their power removed by the Pope, and that Pope died of poisoning. Go figure, right? So they got rid of that Pope. And then in 1798, the Jesuits caused Napoleon and his army to take the Pope captive, take him prisoner, where he later died. And so that ended the reign of the popes of Rome. And since then, you can see over here, the Jesuits of Rome, which are the earth beast of Revelation 13, have taken power of the Vatican, and they're using basically the Jesuit general as the Black Pope. He's the Pope who dresses in black, but he's hidden. He's behind the scenes. You don't see him up front speaking to everybody, but he's the controlling power, and they use the White Pope to gather the world under their power. And Jesuit priests have spread around. So if you remember, like the prophecy in Revelation 13, it says they're going to be lamb-like, but they speak like the dragon. Well, it's not a situation of they started out like that lamb-like and they ended up speaking like the dragon. It's just they dress up as priests. They look like a lamb. They look innocent and all this stuff, but they actually go into countries and they kill, steal, and destroy. So if you can imagine, Jesuits are, during that whole time, they're in all these countries, Catholic countries and everything, and they're taking the confessions of all the leaders of the countries. So they're pretending to be a priest, but they're getting all the intel about what these people are doing, how they're sinning, and the crimes that they've committed against the leaders of all the countries, so that they have intel against those people to use against them and to take control of their country. And now they, so the Jesuits, we won't get into the story of the Jesuits, but they control pretty much everything. So they control the US, CIA, intelligence, they control the world's finances, and ultimately, in the end, they'll determine who buys and sells, and you'll see that played out here in a bit. Do you guys have questions right now?
Good.
All right. I will continue on. So, and I'm just really, everything I'm saying, you don't have to grasp all this. It's a lot to take in, but it's all right here on this document. Everything is on this document. And so, one of the takeaways of the 1260-day reign, a lot of people say, well, that's still coming up. That's still future. And they say that's a 3.5 years. So they're saying it's 1260 days, which is 3.5 years. And what they're telling you is that's going to be the back end of the 70th week of Daniel. So they're saying there's a future 70th week of Daniel. It's 7 years. There'll be a 7-year peace treaty by Israel, right? And then there'll be 3.5 years of relative peace. And then the Antichrist will enter the temple and he'll desolate the temple. And then there'll be 3.5 years of great tribulation. So they're telling you that this 1260 days is yet future. But I'm telling
Wonderful.
He's just talking.
Well, so we probably should tell him once he comes, we miss him.
What's that?
Yes, absolutely.
Are you talking to me or?
Yeah, we lost you there for a minute.
Okay.
Yeah, it's happened a couple of times.
You're not hearing me or what?
Right.
Yes.
You just cut out.
Yeah.
Huh. Oh, I don't know. All right. Sorry.
It's the Jesuits.
So it's all their fault. So, that's the counterpoint. In this document, I always put the counterpoint. So it's not 3.5 years of the future. It's the past. It's already fulfilled. So we don't have, and we won't get into the 7 week of Daniel, but we don't have a 7-year tribulation before us. We don't have a 3.5 year time of great tribulation before us, because the 1290 days and the 1230 days of Daniel 12, that's already been fulfilled from 66 to 70 AD. So that's fulfilled. The 1260 days that are described by Daniel, by John, that we just went through, that was already fulfilled in 1260 years. So it's not future. So there is no future 3.5 year tribulation period. It's not in Scripture. It's already been fulfilled. So it's past. So this gets into a little bit about the Antichrist, that they would deny the Son and just the different things of that. And it gets into a little bit about how the Catholic Church fulfills the obvious. How the world can't see right here that it's describing the harlot, which a harlot is an apostate people group. An apostate church is a harlot, like the Israelites were harlots when they worshiped foreign gods. This is a harlot church because it worships foreign gods. That's all it's saying. And it says they're going to be dressed in purple and scarlet. So I don't know how people are missing this, but that's the enemy at work. So let's go through real quick. I don't know how far we're going to get into this. We're at about 8 o'clock, so we'll just see how far we get. So chapters 2 and 3 describe the 7 church eras. And so it describes Right here, you got Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamos, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. So after Messiah rose again, Jerusalem was desolated, the persecutions began, the Messiah had not returned. So what did he accuse them of? He says, you've lost your first love, because they were expecting him to come back sooner than later. Jerusalem, like I said, was destroyed in 70 AD. They're starting to be attacked by Rome. They're being persecuted, and where's Messiah? So their love grew cold. So it's talking about an actual church era, Smyrna. So, and these are estimates. Some of them are estimates, some of them have definite endpoints. So like the estimate of 100, I don't know when it started, but I know that it basically ended at 312, 313. So the church of Smyrna. What's interesting about Smyrna, and let me back up. If Messiah was just talking to 7 churches back then, he sure left out a lot of churches, right? So who did Paul write to? The Galatians, right? So he talked to the Galatians and a whole bunch of churches. Ephesus, well, we got Ephesus, but he left out Galatians and different churches that he didn't include in these names. What he did is he encoded these names to mean something, and Smyrna means myrrh, which symbolizes death. So what's going on in the Roman Empire from 300 to 313, right? Roman Empire, Satan's using them to try to wipe out the early church when 10 million Christians were martyred by the Roman Empire. So myrrh is the perfect symbol for exactly what's going on. And if you recall his words to the church of Smyrna, he says you're going to have 10 days of tribulation. And he is pointing to the harshest time. So there was 10 periods of persecution by the Roman Empire, and the harshest one was the last one, and that lasted for 10 years. So in this day, one day does equal 10 years, and it was from 303 to 312 when Satan used Emperor Diocletian to try to wipe out the early church. And what's interesting, we'll tie that in, is that's the description of the 5th seal. So you got the Roman Empire, you have Smyrna, which is being killed, and you have the description of the Smyrna church martyrs. So you remember the martyrs who were under the temple, or under the, I guess they're under the, they're crying out, their blood's crying out. Well, they're not actually in heaven crying out. It's just like Abel's blood was crying out because he had been killed. Same thing here. Their blood was crying out. 10 million saints have been killed. Their blood was crying out for Messiah to avenge their deaths, which he did, which you're going to see. Pergamos is the next one. So right here is Pergamos. And that's when Constantine, so that's how you map out the persecutions ended in 312 and 313. Constantine called for an end of persecutions, and then he began to go along the process of creating the Roman religion of Christianity, right? So he was combining the paganism of Rome with scriptural terms to create a false church. And that really is the falling away of 2 Thessalonians. So if this right here, if the popes of Rome are the son of perdition, which Paul was talking about in 2 Thessalonians 2, then the falling away had to happen before the son of perdition showed up. And so the falling away happened in the 4th century. And that's actually my study called The Falling Away of 2 Thessalonians 2. So it goes through that whole thing of the creation of the religion of Roman Christianity, the son of perdition in the temple of God, Easter being replacing Passover, Christmas replacing the Feast of Tabernacles, the Sabbath being changed to Sunday, and the names of the Father and Son. So it kind of goes through that whole narrative. Does that make sense that the falling away was back then?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
You're still hearing me?
We hear you. Yep.
Okay.
Still hearing you.
So you can kind of start to see how these things are relating. So right here, I mean, what's going on, and you'll see this above, what's going on right here in the Roman Empire is the Roman Empire is collapsing internally, and then it's going to start to be attacked by other armies, but it's fallen away internally. So Satan's looking at it. So here's the real narrative. Satan tried to use the Roman Empire to wipe out the early church, killing 10 million people. But what was happening is Satan found out is that the more I kill him, the faster it grows. So he said, and his Roman Empire was falling away. He was losing power over the Roman Empire because it was collapsing internally. So what he did is he said, well, if I can't beat them, if I can't destroy them externally, I'm going to seek to destroy them internally. So he created the Roman Church. So he propped up the popes of Rome. He had Constantine and the Roman bishops create the false narrative of a false Messiah, if you will, to deceive from within. And the crazy part is all the things they changed were back in the 4th century, and we are so far removed from that right now that most people have no clue. And when you bring up, the true Hebrew names of Messiah and the Father, when you bring up that Christmas and Easter are pagan, when you bring up that the feast days are scriptural and that's what we should be observing, not Easter and Christmas, when you bring these things up, people think you're a heretic, but all you're really doing is teaching the ancient truths of Scripture, because that's how far removed we are from here to there. So the next church is Thyatira, and Thyatira means ruled by a woman. Well, who's the woman? Who just rose to power? It's the harlot of Revelation 17. It's the Roman Catholic Church, and she is Jezebel. So it talks about Jezebel. And you had people groups back then of the followers of Messiah, the Vandos, the Albigenses, the Waldenses, the Cliffites, which followed Wycliffe. And those people were testifying basically about two things. They were proclaiming that salvation is through Messiah alone and not through the sacraments and not through the papal church. And they were proclaiming that the popes of Rome are the Antichrist. So this ascension to power happened over time. At 538, they didn't have a lot of power, but by the time they got to the 12th, 13th century, the popes of Rome had so much power that they were controlling kings, all the kings of Europe. They controlled everybody. Everybody was bowing down to their authority, and at that time they were making the statements that we are as a God, that we are Messiah in the flesh, that we provide salvation, we forgive sins. So they were at the height of their power. But what they were doing during that time is Satan was using them to try to wipe out the two witnesses against them. And that is to burn the scriptures, and that's to kill the saints. And they did that so relentlessly during the Dark Ages that in 1514, they proclaimed that all of Christendom was under their power. So what they were proclaiming is they were proclaiming that there was no witnesses against them. So all the Waldenses, the Vados, and all these people, they were silent. They were as dead because they weren't testifying against Rome anymore. And they celebrated with great feast. And that happened in 1514. So that's how you mark that church, is starting in 538 when the Roman Catholic Church began. And that church era ended in 1514, because the next church, which is Sardis, means the escaping one, which is so profound. So at that point, they're wiping out the scriptures. Nobody has the Bible. They're teaching in Latin. They've taken control of Christendom, and nobody's protesting against them. And so then they pronounce them as dead in 1514. And so here comes the Sardis church. And if you look in Revelation 3, oops. Well, can you still hear me?
Yes.
All right. So here we go. So here's the church of Sardis. And what does Messiah start out to say? I know thy works, that thou hast a name, that thou livest, and art dead. So when people tell you, and I'm really talking about the two witnesses at this point. So when people tell you, because the passage in Revelation 11 says that the two witnesses will be dead for 3.5 days. Well, in this case, it's 1 day equals 1 year, because it's the 1260 years. So 3.5 days is 3.5 years. So tie that in with the Messiah, what Messiah is saying to that church. He's saying, you have a name that you livest, but you're dead. But what does he say in verse 2? Be watchful and strengthen the things which remain, which are ready to die. So they're not dead. They're just spiritually dead. They're as dead. But he gave them a command to follow. And so it's the same thing here. So the popes of Rome proclaimed them as dead, but that didn't mean that every single saint was dead. It didn't mean that all the witnesses were dead. It just meant that they weren't protesting anymore. And the fascinating part is during that 3.5 years that they were supposedly dead, Messiah was having Martin Luther, and this is fulfillment of Revelation where it says measure the temple. Martin Luther was measuring the temple with a rod of iron. He was measuring the temple. He was given, so he's a Catholic monk. And Martin Luther was given the scriptures. So all he knew was the Latin. So he's a Catholic monk. All he knows is the Latin. All of a sudden he's given the scriptures to read, and he's told, you need to compare what the popes of Rome are proclaiming against what the scriptures say. And what did he find out? He found out that they're an apostate church. He found out that they're the harlot of Revelation 17. He found out that they're the Gentiles. So when you read Revelation and it says, they're the Gentiles in the outer court, he found out that they're the Gentiles in the outer court. In the first temple, there was no Gentile court. In the second temple, they built that, and then mankind added the court of the Gentiles. So that's a man-made addition to the court. Well, the Roman Catholic Church belongs in the court of the Gentiles because they're not part of the true temple. But tie that in with what 2 Thessalonians says, that the popes of Rome, the son of perdition, would pretend to be, he would proclaim to be God in the temple of God. So he's right around the temple of God proclaiming to be God, but he's not God. So exactly 3.5 years after the declaration in 1514 that, there was no protesters against Rome, Martin Luther posted his 95 Thesis on the door of the Church of Wittenberg, which sparked the Protestant Reformation, which brought the two witnesses alive again, and millions of people came out of the Roman Catholic Church. So now tie in the name, escaping one, right? So now they're escaping the grasp of the Roman Catholic Church, and millions of people are pouring out of the Catholic Church to be saved by faith. Millions of people are reading the scriptures for the first time because Wycliffe, Tyndale, Luther had translated the scriptures, and of course, in the amazing timing of Messiah, the printing press was developed during that time. So now you have printed Bibles, right, that are available. So you go back to this church era, and nobody gets to read the scriptures, and there's a famine for the word of God, and they're as dead. And so here's the thing you pay attention about the two witnesses. It says is that they are two olive trees, right? And there are two lampstands. Well, an olive tree provides what? Olive oil. And olive oil feeds a lampstand. So you need olive oil, you need the scriptures, you need the word of God, the Old and New Testament to thrive, to shine brightly in this world. You need the scriptures. So it's telling you the two witnesses are the word of God, the Old and New Testament, and the Church of Christ is the two lampstands. So back in Revelation 1, Messiah defined, he said there's 7 lampstands, and they represent the 7 churches. So lampstand 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And he's saying the two witnesses are 2 lampstands. So what he just told you is they're 2 church eras which endured the 1260 years of the reign of the Roman Catholic Church. So once in the 16th century, here's Luther. The witnesses are coming back to life, and the word of God is going everywhere because it's been printed in small Bibles. And that's going to tie into Revelation 10, which is the little book, the printed Bible. So John was used to long scrolls and scriptures. Here's a little book printed in English, which is proclaiming the gospel. And John was told in that passage that you should eat the little book, and it's going to be as sweet as honey, as of course it was, because here the saints have been oppressed, and there's a famine for the word of God, and now all of a sudden here's the printed Bible, which is spreading to everybody, and people are getting saved. So it's sweet as honey, but when it got to his stomach, it was bitter. Why was it bitter? Because in the 16th century, right, in response to the Protestant Reformation, the popes of Rome were freaking out, and they empowered the Jesuits of Rome to counter the Reformation. So they started killing the saints and making up different deceptions, but the primary part was they were starting to kill the saints through the Spanish Inquisition. So that's the bitter part. Y'all with me?
Yes.
Yes.
Are you bored yet?
Yep.
No.
Absolutely not.
Is this making any sense? Is this tying together for you at all?
Absolutely,
Yes.
yes.
Okay. So the next one, these are easy. So the Church of Philadelphia, I mean, really, you in the way you know the starting point of this one is, well, that's when Messiah proclaimed them as dead, 1514. Just like they said they're dead, Messiah said they're dead. We can assume it started at 1514. It goes through the end of the reign of the popes of Rome, which is 1798. And then we have the Church of Philadelphia, and Messiah had nothing bad to say about them. They were on international missions. Bibles were spreading. Bible societies were developed. The popes of Rome condemned the Bible societies as evil. I mean, so it was a great time. The Church of Philadelphia was a great time. What's interesting about the Church of Philadelphia is the Messiah said that he had nothing bad to say, and he said, you will be, because you did all this, and he's saying he did so well, you won't be here during the time of what do you say, temptation? So here's Laodicea. I think he said during the time of the hour of temptation, which is fascinating to me, because that's obviously if he's saying they're not going to be in it, he's saying the next church is, which is our church era. And what you find to be true is even though the Jesuits created the deceptions about so basically what they did in the 16th century to counter the Protestant reformers saying that the popes were the Antichrist is that they said they did two things. They created preterism. So one of the Jesuit priests created the narrative of preterism that says that Revelation was fulfilled symbolically in the first century and that the Antichrist was Nero. So that deflects blame back in history. And then they created futurism. And that narrative says that that the Antichrist is a one-man Antichrist in the end times, in the 7-year tribulation period, and all of Revelation will be filled in the last 7 years. So if that was true, then how could the popes of Rome be the Antichrist, because he's all the way at the end of time in the last 7 years, and nobody bought it. So during this whole time, the Protestant reformers were like, yeah, no thanks. We know that's not true. All the Protestant reformers had boldly proclaimed that the popes of Rome are the Antichrist. They're the son of perdition. They're the little horn of Daniel 7. So nothing took hold. But really, it wasn't until this point, starting in the Church of Philadelphia, that the futuristic deceptions came through, and that came through through Schofield, through Maitland, through Schofield Bible that came into America and stuff like that. And one of my favorite authors is Henry Grattan Guinness, and he wrote in the late 1800s. And he wrote the great book, Romanism and the Reformation. And one of the reasons he wrote the book is to counter the futuristic prophecy teachings, which were starting to take hold in the late 19th century. And since then, we've fallen aside. So since then, the Jesuits have taken control of seminaries. They own, basically, they control Dallas Theological Seminary. And there's a study on my website that proves the direct link from Schofield. So the Schofield Bible brought their deceptions into America, and then the founder of Dallas Theological Seminary was directly tied into Schofield. He was a mentor of Schofield, and he took over his church when Schofield died. And then Lewis Sperry Schaefer went on to found Dallas Theological Seminary. So you have a direct link from the Schofield Bible to Dallas Theological, which is the most famous seminary in America, which is where the leaven of the deceptions came in. So it's been downhill ever since. And that's why, even today, that's why when I make explanations, when you guys make explanations online, people are like, yeah, that's not true. Because we're so far off the mark. We're so far removed from truth, which, during this whole age right here, you had great theologians teaching you that historicism and teaching you that the popes of Rome are the little horn of Daniel, the son of perdition, and the Antichrist. Still with me?
Yep.
Yeah.
How are we doing on time?
Yeah,
We're at
I'm
8:15.
here.
Do you want to continue or?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, keep going.
Okay. I mean, what we'll do, we'll just
Yes.
we'll go through the iron and clay, and we'll go through, and that'll tie into the trumpets, and I'll summarize. What my real goal was tonight is to show you we are here, where we are.
Okay.
So we are here. That's my end goal. So I want to go through this phase. So let's tie this in. So let's go back to this right here. So you had the Roman Empire wiping out 10 million Christians. And here's the fascinating part, and I really want you to get this with everything in you, because the futurist explanation makes you think the Messiah has been sitting around doing basically not much for 2,000 years, right? So he did his work in the first century, and he hasn't done anything basically that we know of, as far as fulfilling prophecy, because all that's future. That's what the futurists will tell you, right? But what I want you to see is that Messiah has been extremely active in defending his people and executing vengeance for his people. So here you have the Roman Empire. They killed 10 million saints. You had the Church of Smyrna that was hit especially hard. And then you had the creation of the false religion of Roman Christianity. So here's seal 1. And let's go. I'll go to. So here's seal 1 coming up. And so if you look at Revelation 1, the narrative of Revelation 1, first sentence, right? The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave unto him to show unto his servants things which must shortly come to pass. So I don't know, in the Greek what that means, but shortly come to pass means exactly what you would think it means, not 2,000 years later. So here we are. Here's the first seal. So once again, John can't, and this is the most impactful stuff that's gonna be against the Roman Empire. So he can't name them, but so he can't say that they're gonna collapse. He can't come out and say these words as such. So he's gonna use symbols, and so the early church would have known these symbols. They would have known that on the first seal, the white horse would represent the conquering Roman Empire, which expanded the most from 96 to 180 AD. It was the time of its greatest expansion, its military conquests. They celebrated those by riding white horses in victory parades in Rome. And the Cretan Roman emperors, Trajan, Hadrian, Antonius Pius, and Marcus Aurelius, each had a bow for their symbol, right? So the description of the first seal is you'd have the white horse and the rider would have a bow, right? He would have a crown on his head, and the Caesars wore crowns on their heads for victories, for a military battle. So the early church knew this. The early church knew who he was talking about, but is he pointing to the Rome by doing that? Maybe Rome knew. But what's fascinating to me, and I don't really cover this much in my explanation because people stumble all over it and they can't accept it, so I don't go down the road. But here's the fascinating part. When you back up to Daniel, it said that God was going to set up his kingdom, which would never end, and he did that through Messiah, obviously. And so what's going on during the first seal? What's going on during the first century and second century and third century? The early church is rising and ultimately conquering the Roman Empire. And the mighty Roman Empire, millions of people are being saved. So this little fledgling church, this little nothing, church is taking control of nations, taking control of the Roman Empire covertly through spiritual means, not through weapons of war. So some people in the early church actually believe that white horse represented Messiah victoriously conquering Rome by his gospel. And what's interesting, of course, that it ties in with his return, which is again going to be on a white horse of coming to conquer and having victory. So the second, let me share the image here. So the second seal, so all this stuff is going on right here. So what I want you to see is that Messiah is beginning to judge the Roman Empire who had started to persecute. So the second seal, it's a red horse, represents a bloody time in the Roman Empire for about 100 years. They went into a phase of revolution, civil war for 90 years, and there were 32 different emperors during that time. So they were killing each other. During 90 years, you had 32 different emperors because they kept killing each other. So now you have civil war. The third seal represents gloom and despair. They had excessive taxes, kind of like we do today, to pay for all our wars. It's the same scenario as today. We were trillions of dollars into debt because of our wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. It's the same thing. So the prices for wheat, everything were going up. There's excessive taxes, but the prices for wheat and barley, which were decreed, in that passage, were the exact prices during these years. So we have a direct match. The pale horse represents a time from 250 to 300 AD, where 1/4 of the Roman Empire died from famine, plague, pestilence, and violence. Pretty significant, right? So, and to clarify, when you're reading through the seals, it says earth, so you think, oh, 1/4 of the earth died. Well, it's not talking about the whole globe. It's talking about the Roman Empire. So the prophecy, the earth of prophecy is the Roman Empire. And then the fifth seal, of course, represents the billions of martyrs. It's talking about them being in their blood crying out for vengeance. Well, here it comes. The sixth seal, we're right here. Sixth seal represents the Roman Empire being split. So if you recall, the statue had iron legs, and it split into two, east and west. And you had those two battling back and forth. In 312, Constantine ended the persecutions. Constantine took control. And so he had fought back against the other emperors of the other side and took control. So there was great upheaval. So earthquakes in Bible prophecy is not talking about a physical earthquake. It's talking about political upheaval. And you'll see that played out a few times here. So it's basically telling you the Roman Empire, things are changing. And Constantine defeated the other two Roman emperors, and he became the sole ruler of the West and the East. And the Roman leaders who, if Constantine's taking control, he's going to get rid of the other leaders. So they fell out of place. So Satan was losing power over Rome. And again, he used the Roman bishops and Emperor Constantine to create the cult of Roman Christianity. So we've gone through that. And we've gone through the following away. Seventh seal represents the Lord sealing his servants before he sounds the seven trumpets of judgments against the pagan Roman Empire. So this, all this, just the summary, the counterpoint is that the judgments are not future, like most pastors teach. And the amazing part is that when from 66 to 70 AD, Messiah had in place Jewish historian Josephus to document all that happened. And so based on the testimony of Josephus, we can map out the true fulfillment of the 1290 days, the 1335 days, how many died. We know 1.1 million died. We know that no saints died. We know, all the different things. And it's the same thing with Rome. Edward Gibbon wrote The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. So he's not a Christian. He's not biased, but he wrote this whole work. But you can look at that work and you can see exactly how prophecy was fulfilled, which I think is amazing. So now it moves on to the judgment trumpets. And trumpets they're used to signify a lot of things, but they're used to signify war. And so here comes the war against the Roman Empire. And, if you recall the Old Testament, Messiah always uses, or God uses, always uses other people groups, pagan people groups, to judge, to make judgment. So that was the Assyrians, that was the Babylonians, that was the Romans against the Jews. So here comes the Goths. So if you recall the first trumpet, it talks about hail and fire coming on the land. And that was fulfilled by the Goths, by a lark from 400 to 410. Hail means war. So it says they're coming like hail, it means war. And the Lord caused the Goths, who were led by a lark, to move in the direction in which literal hail came, north to south in that area. They attacked the Roman Empire in Greece, Gaul, Spain, and then 3,000 Goths invaded Italy. And the fire, which it speaks about fire, represents their scorched earth policy, which basically they burned everything in their path. That's how they rolled. The second trumpet represents the Vandals by conquest of seas. So when you read, and see, I don't get into all the verses here, but when you read it, it's talking about the seas, and there'll be death in the seas and stuff like that. Well, here come the Vandals, and how do they go about war? They go about war in the seas. So it represents them coming against the Roman Empire. They attacked the coastal lands on Roman territories in the Mediterranean and all the islands, and they left bloodshed and confusion in the wake. The third temple was the invasion of Attila the Hun, who scourged the rivers in 451. A star in prophecy represents a leader. So he was the great burning star, the king of the Huns. He was actually called the scourge of God. That was, people, historians call him the scourge of God. Here he is fulfilling Bible prophecy. And here's the fascinating part, because you hear people say, well, the third trumpet is wormwood, and that could be an asteroid or whatever, or it could be a nuclear disaster, and it's going to, pollute the waters and stuff like that. So you hear him say that, but here's the amazing part. He came from an area around the river in whatever, Illyricum, which is Greek, is called Apsithos, which means wormwood. So there's your direct fulfillment of wormwood. Attila and his 800,000 man army rose up, flashed across the land, and desolated the Italian Alps, which in the prophecy says it's going to make the water wormwood. It's going to make the waters bitter. Well, what they did is they made war on the waters, and you had, I don't even know, hundreds of thousands of dead bodies in the rivers upstream in the Alps. Well, what's that going to do? It's going to pollute the rivers, and it's going to make them bitter and undrinkable as they go downstream. So there's your bitter waters. And then there's the fourth trumpet, which is the final overthrow of the western part of Rome by the Heruli. It represents the sun, moon, and stars. In this case, people say, oh, this is the end because it's the sun, moon, and stars falling away or being hidden. Well, what it's talking about is leadership structure. And you can see that in the story of Joseph. And Joseph said he had the vision where the sun and moon and stars are going to bow down to me. And his father said, you're telling me that we're going to bow down to you? So what was his father saying? His father was saying that he knew full well that Joseph was talking about the leadership structure of the family, the father being the sun, the mother being the moon, the brothers being the stars. Same thing here. So when the sun, moon, and stars are affected in prophecy, it's talking about leadership structure and change. Well, this is pretty huge. This is the Roman emperor, which had been in power since the emperors have been in power for hundreds of years. You have the last one being captured by the Heruli, removed from power in 476 AD. So that is the sun, which would be obviously the emperor, the moon, which would be his council, and then the leadership structure would be the other leaders in the empire. You with me? Anybody?
Yep, we're here.
Just talking to myself again. So, and here's the tie-in. So you have that going on. So map this out, and this whole document is in chronological order. So the popes of Rome, the Roman emperor just got removed, and now you tie in the prophecy with the little horn of Daniel, right? The Roman Empire splits into 10 kingdoms. The little horn rises up. The little horn causes the Heruli, the Vandals, and the Ostrogoths to be plucked out because they wouldn't bow down to their authority. The Roman emperor was the restrainer of 2 Thessalonians. So it says the son of when the restrainer is removed, the son of perdition will rise to power. Well, some people say, well, that's in the 7-year tribulation. And when the Holy Spirit is removed at the rapture, then the son of perdition will rise to power. The restrainer was the Roman emperors. But Paul couldn't say that. Paul can't say the Roman emperors are going to be removed from power because that would invite persecution. So he reminded them, he said, remember what I told you. He told them in person it was the Roman emperors. So he's saying it's the restrainer. And once the restrainer, the Roman emperors were removed, the popes rose up to power, the son of perdition rose up to power. So now you have confirmation there. Popes of Rome sitting in the temple of God, same thing, and you can go through that. So you see the total tie-in there. So all these things happened, if you're looking at this chart, to desolate the Roman Empire. And now we come to like the fifth trumpet. And the fifth trumpet and sixth trumpet are extremely descriptive. And the reason is you look at these and they only lasted for 10 years, 50 years. I mean, they didn't last a long time. So the descriptions are very short. But when you get to the fifth trumpet and the sixth trumpet, the descriptions are really long. And the fifth trumpet, I don't want to cover too much, but what's fascinating is you look at the ironclad feet of Daniel. It represents the popes of Rome empowering the rise of Islam and Muslims to use them to kill Jews and the saints. They don't mix well. They battled over Jerusalem during the Crusades. But what's fascinating is here comes, so tie that in. They just are empowering the Muslims to go carry out their orders. Now tie in the rise of Islam and the rise of Muhammad. So here's the fifth trumpet. So you're matching up the iron clay feet, mixing in directly being fulfilled by the fifth trumpet. And the fifth trumpet is describing the, it's rising up out of the bottomless pit, and it's describing the rise of Muhammad and Islam, who were used to attack the Roman Empire for 150 years. So it's basically the narrative saying they're going to come out for 5 months. The locusts are going to come out for 5 months, and they're going to attack everything, but they're not going to eat a green thing, right? Which is ludicrous to think a locust isn't going to eat one green thing for 5 months, because, well, that's exactly what they do, is eat green things. So it's talking about the Muslims rising up and going to battle against the Western Roman Empire. And so 5 months, 30 days to a month, so you have 150 days. 1 day equals 1 year, so you have 150 years. So exactly from 612 to 762, they attacked. And the description is, let's go through it here. It actually will give more description. So the description in the fifth trumpet is that they would have crowns of gold. Well, that was the Arabs' turbans. They had faces of men. Well, John was used to Romans who shaved. So Muslims had beards, so they had faces of men. They had long hair like women, which Muslims do, or did. Breastplates of iron. They wore chainmail to battle, and they were fierce, or they had teeth of lion because they were fierce. The falling star was Muhammad, so a star can represent a person. The falling star was Muhammad. The smoke out of the bottomless pit was the lies of the Quran. So here's the popes of Rome empowering this army to go attack, and to help them take control of the vast Roman Empire, because they didn't really have an army of their own. So the fifth trumpet is not real locusts filling the earth for 5 months. It was already fulfilled. And then there's the sixth trumpet. So the sixth trumpet represents the Lord releasing the Turks. And they were actually camped out by this. It talks about being released from the river Euphrates. They were camped out by the river Euphrates. They were released to go attack the Eastern Roman Empire, because the empires had split. The Roman Empire had split from east to west. And actually the Orthodox Church split from the Roman Catholic Church, I think in about the 11th century. So Rome was not very happy about that. All the Orthodox Christians were over on the east side, and they weren't happy. So here they're sending the Muslims to go attack the Ottoman Empire. So they crossed over the river Euphrates to conquer a third of the Roman Empire during 390 years. So what the text says is they were prepared for an hour and a day and a month and a year. So a year is 360, a month is 30, obviously a day is 1, so you got 360, 3, 1, it's 390. 390, 1 day equals 1 year in prophecy in these cases. So it's talking about 390 years. And history shows that they started attacking in 1062 and they ended attacking in 1453, exactly 391 years. Go figure. And it talks about them having fire, smoke, and brimstone coming out of the mouth of the horses. It's really talking about the use of not only large cannons but firearms with brimstone and using gunpowder and stuff like that. So they'd be on their horses, they'd be shooting the gun. The gun would be, the end of the gun would be around the front of the horse, and out of that gun would come this powder, which John described as fire, smoke, and brimstone. But here's what's interesting is Constantinople. They were attacking Constantinople, and it was protected by thick walls that you couldn't penetrate. And so the Ottoman Empire were the first people in battle to use really large cannons. And they shot huge metal balls at the walls to desolate the walls of Constantinople to get access to that city. You with me?
We are.
All right.
I'm here.
Still here?
Any questions?
I'm still here.
All right. We're pretty close to done. Here's the fascinating part. This is what I love, I adore about this. When you see this narrative and you can take it in, you just see how active Messiah has been. What's fascinating is before Constantinople is attacked, a lot of the priests escaped Constantinople, and they took the Holy Scriptures in Hebrew and Greek to Europe. Right? So what's going on? So this is going on in in the 1400s. Well, what's happening down here? The Scriptures have been destroyed, right? So there's no Scriptures over in this area, and there's a famine for the Word of God. Here come the Scriptures, and now they're going to Europe, where they're going to be used, and they're going to be put into the lap of people like Wycliffe to translate them, Tyndale, Luther, right? Which resulted in the little book of Revelation, the printed Bible in English and German and all those languages. I mean, that's just, when you look at how active, Messiah has been to get those scriptures from this point over here to Europe, to get them into the hands of these people so they can put them in a printed format so that the Word of God can distribute throughout the world so people can be saved by faith. I mean, I just think it's fabulous. So these obviously, these all fall into place. So you look at the timeline, 612 to 762, 1062 to 1453, you're lining up, all things are taking place here. Then there's the rise of the little book of Revelation 10. There's Revelation 11, where Martin Luther measured the temple with the scriptures, found out that the Roman Catholic Church was the harlot. He posted his 95 Theses. The Protestant Reformation was sparked. And then Revelation actually talks about, that people assign it to the end. If you read Revelation 14, it's talking about a harvest. And what it's talking about is there's a great harvest, and that's really it's speaking about what's coming up in the Protestant Reformation. So here's the Protestant Reformation being born. Here's the Word of God spreading out through all the world. And the harvest is all those millions of souls that were saved out of the Catholic Church. And then the judgment part of Revelation 14 is talking about the upcoming bowl judgments. And it talks about, Revelation 14 actually talks about those who would have the mark of the beast. And Revelation 13 talks about the mark of the beast. So people put those things together and they think they're the same, but they're not. So Revelation 14 is actually talking about people that had the mark of the beast during this time right here. And I'll explain that. And then Revelation 13, the earth beast, is talking about the Jesuits of Rome who will take control in a one world government. And there'll be, there's the end times mark of the beast, if you will. But what's fascinating is during this time, part of the Counter-Reformation right here, the popes of Rome were getting Catholic countries such as France and Spain to kill the Christians in their country. And so like France was about a 50-50 split, 50% Protestant, 50% Catholic. And for the most part, they got along. But then the popes of Rome commanded that the leaders of France send their armies out and kill the Protestants of France. And they killed the Huguenots at the different battles, like 100,000 at a time during that event. There's the Spanish Inquisition and stuff. So when you look at it from that point of view, these people in France and Spain and other countries were revering the Pope, so they had the mark on their forehead. And they were obeying the Pope's commands, so they had the mark on their right hand. So when you think about the mark of the beast, it's not really talking about a physical mark. It's talking about who is your allegiance to. Are you following Scripture, or are you following the popes of Rome? And so these people had killed the saints. And so Messiah, being faithful, is going to pour out judgment on those countries. And what's fascinating, once again, is he's going to use a pagan people group to do it. He's going to use the Jesuits of Rome to do it. And we talk a lot about the Jesuits now and how evil they are and all this stuff. But what you're going to see is that it's the Jesuits who are used to pour judgment onto those countries and on the popes of Rome. So we'll go through that. So bowl number 1, it was a sword being poured out. So in France, it used to be a 50-50 split between Catholics and Protestants, but they got rid of all the Catholics. They either killed them or they drove them out of the country. So now basically everybody's Catholic. But what the Jesuits did, well, let me back up. The one point, if you recall, the King of France got the Pope of Rome to remove the power of the Jesuits. So the Jesuits are mad. The Jesuits are angry at the King of France, right? Because he got the Pope to remove their power, to take away their funds, to remove their authority, all that stuff. And other countries, such as Spain or other countries, had kicked the Jesuits out because they're evil. So that's the mindset of the Jesuits. So here comes the bulls. So what the Jesuits did is they caused France to embrace atheism. So now you don't have Protestants to balance any. You have a whole country with no Protestants, no true ones, and now atheism's taken hold, and the whole country descends into this crazy frenzy of atheism, and we don't believe in God, and it's just a terrible mindset that corrupted the whole country. Bull number 2 was the French Revolution. So when you look at what happened in the French Revolution, the Catholic bishops and leaders got killed. The leaders of France got killed, and hundreds of thousands of French got killed. And when you get into the details of it, they actually got killed in the very same places that they had killed the saints. So they had cut off the heads of the saints, they had killed the saints. They got killed in the very same places. So Messiah is pouring out his vengeance on the popes, or he will on the Pope, but on the Catholics and on the people who had killed the saints. Bull 3 describes the spread to rural France. So, it was in the big cities, now it's going on to the rural places, and they're killing in the rivers and local places out there where they killed the saints there too. Now the French are being killed, and there's a lot of blood. Bull 3 represents the bloody Napoleonic Wars. So Napoleon is controlled by the Jesuits. And now Napoleon's making war with Spain and with all these other different countries. So now their blood's being poured out. So Messiah is exacting vengeance against those countries too, because they had poured out the blood of the saints. And then bull number 5, the Pope was captured in 1798 and he lost his civil power. So that is the end of the Roman Catholic Church, and the Jesuits took control. So that is bull number 5. Bull number 6 is, if you recall, it's bull 6 and it lines up with trumpet 6. So the Turks were released. The Turks turned into the Ottoman Empire, and the Ottoman Empire controlled a vast amount of territory. A lot of it was in the Middle East. Well, now bull 5 is saying it's the drying up of the river Euphrates. So what it's telling you is the Ottoman Empire would be dried up. And you can go Google, Ottoman Empire, follow the Ottoman Empire, and Wikipedia or whoever is going to show you they lost territory. And what's fascinating about that is it shows you, and this will go through a lot more detail if you go through the study. It's going to talk about the Jesuits they had been kicked out of countries by being the Jesuits. So ever since that time, they've done things covertly. So they created the Bavarian Illuminati. So everybody knows they know the Illuminati. They work behind them. They infiltrated Freemasonry. So they worked through Freemasonry. The Carrolls helped found the United States of America. They donated the land for Washington, D.C. They founded Georgetown University. The Jesuits have been very involved with America for a long time. So you can go through and see all that. But here's the bowl. So it was drying up. So 6 bowl was poured out to dry up the Ottoman Empire, the Turks of the Euphrates River that had been released. During the 18th and 19th century, they lost control of territories which they had occupied, and the text says, preparing the way for the rise of the kings of the East. A lot of people will say, well, that's Russia and that's China, but they've been around for a long time. This is telling you the drying up of the Ottoman Empire paved the way for the kings of the East. Well, when you look at history, you have Syria, Jordan, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait are all kingdoms. They're categorized as kingdoms. They have a king. So those are your kings of the East. And then the Ottoman Empire controlled Palestine, and they lost control of Palestine in 1917 to Great Britain, which the Jesuits controlled Great Britain. So they went and captured it, and that led, of course, to the Zionist state of Israel. And then the last Ottoman Sultan lost power in 1922, and all they have left is the country of Turkey. So the vast Ottoman Empire was dried up, just like the text says, and all they have is Turkey. You with me?
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Right here.
Now here's a question for you. Had you guys gone through any of my studies to show the fulfillment of the seals, trumpets, and bowls, or is this totally new to you? Am I blowing you up?
Yeah.
Well, I've read it.
It's new to me.
Okay. And all these
But Shane and I went through it.
well, here's what I'll say. So what you want to do is, because I'm just doing an overview. I mean, I know you're like, really, this is really what it means. So go to Christianity Believes, and then the newest section is Revelation Timeline Decoded, and that's the best place to go for these studies. And what you will see is you can go through all these. So the Spirit put in my path someone who made videos about a lot of these different things. And so if you click over here, you'll either see a study list, you can go that route, or on the right-hand side, there's this, and you'll see, like the fifth trumpet. So you can go to the fifth trumpet, and it's going to give you a summary, and it's actually going to give you videos that'll go through verse by verse by verse. You can watch the videos that'll go verse by verse that explain the exact fulfillment of Muhammad and the turbans, the gold turbans and the chainmail and all that stuff. And then here's my verse by verse explanation. So you can go through the fifth trumpet and you can see exactly what it's saying about the bottomless pit and the fire, smoke, and brimstone and all those things. So it's all explained. I'm just doing a generic version of this, but everything's explained. So this guy has videos on all the seals, all the trumpets, and you'll find verse by verse explanations, the explanation of the falling away. So this is in chronological order too. So the falling away, the trumpets, the little horn, the son of perdition, the iron clay feet, the fifth trumpet, sixth trumpet, little book, the measuring the temple by Martin Luther, the two witnesses, the seventh trumpet. Again, the same thing I just covered, the Protestant Reformation, the mark of the beast of Revelation 14, and then the judgments of the bowls. And so it'll explain all this in detail.
Is that his site?
Yeah. So let's just get to where we're at right now. And one more thing to cover, I guess, that'll tie it kind of together. So there's the tail. So if you read Revelation 16, it's going to talk about the three unclean spirits that come out of the dragon, the false prophet, and the beast. Well, the dragon is Satan, and the Jesuits are the false prophets, and the Roman Catholic Church is the beast. And if I didn't cover that, I'm going to back up one sec. So the title of Antichrist, if you will, of Revelation 13 Sea Beast, it's pointing to a position. So like the King of England or the President of the United States. It's not pointing to one man, it's pointing to a position, and that's the office of the papacy that's existed, that was, existed and was in power from 538 to 1798. So the Antichrist that Revelation is talking about is all of those popes of Rome. Messiah said, many would come in my name. Well, they proclaim they proclaim the title of that they're vicarious, vicar of Christ, which means vice Christ, which means in place of Christ. So many came in my name. So they fulfill that role, but they're not in power anymore. So the white pope, the popes of Rome that existed from 538 to 1798 aren't in power anymore per se, but they're still around and they're still being used. So they're still here. It's just that the Jesuits have taken control of the Vatican. The black pope controls the Vatican. The black pope controls the white pope, and they're using the white pope. So the white pope's still there. The pope that we know is still there. It's just that they're not really the ones that are in control. It's the Jesuits that are in control. So when Revelation 13 says that they would create an image of the beast, well, that's exactly what the Jesuits did. They created an image of this right here. They created an image of the church state, which is run by the popes, but that's just an image. It's not real. So the popes of Rome are just puppets, the white popes of Rome that are puppets. They've been puppets the whole time. They're acting just like these people over here, but it's really the Jesuits of Rome who control the papacy. And so when you look at the false prophet, it's the same thing. It's been fulfilled by many Jesuit generals who served just like the popes. Typically, they used to serve, as long as they lived, and they died, they get a new one. So there's one right now. And of course, there's still an Antichrist pope, and there's a false prophet, and there'll be one in the last, when Messiah comes back, there'll be one, but it's speaking about a position. So I just want to make sure that makes sense. So when Revelation 16 is talking about three unclean spirits, the end result of those unclean spirits is that it's going to result in a one world government. So whatever those three unclean spirits are, it's going to push the world into a one world government. Well, we can look back at history and see exactly what the Jesuits have done. Is the Jesuits, who are the earth beasts, have caused 2 world wars, and they will have caused 3 world wars. So by the time 3 world wars have taken place, that'll be everything that's needed to push the world into the one world government. So the Jesuits control all sides. They use the Hegelian dialectic, which means they control both sides of the story. They fund both sides, they benefit from both sides, and they control the narrative to create their desired outcome. So World War I, they caused the overthrow of the Tsars of Russia, who had opposed them. They brought in communism. They opposed communism against us, so they control both sides. They took control of all these countries, and they caused the Ottoman Empire to lose control of Palestine and all that stuff. And then they fomented World War II with Hitler. They backed Hitler. They backed the Nazi regime. They backed all the countries. So what they were doing in those instances were taking control of countries and taking control of civil rights. And you can even look at 9/11, and it's the same thing, that it took control of civil rights. And so by the time we get through World War III, and what's interesting is, I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but now I got to think of his name. It was, who was it? It was Albert, you guys know this. It was Albert, trying to think of his name, Albert, the Freemason, who came out with the vision. Yeah, Albert Pike.
It was Pike.
So he's the guy that started Scottish Rite Freemasonry in America, and he had a vision of 3 world wars, which would lead towards the one world government. What's fascinating, so here's my point. You match up history to fulfill prophecy. So when I was led to Albert Pike's vision of 3 world wars, I go, wait a minute. I go, the end game of exactly what he described as 3 world wars would lead us into the one world government, where the true Luciferian doctrine would be introduced to the world. I go, that's the answer. So now look at it. Look at what they're doing right now. They're positioning the kings of the East, right? Those kings of the East, which are in the Middle East, they're positioning those countries against Israel. And that'll be World War III. So those Muslim countries are going to attack Israel. That'll be the fulfillment of Albert Pike's vision. That'll be between that and a worldwide financial collapse, the world will beg for a solution. So when you pit Muslims and Islam against the Jews and Israel, the world's going to cry out for an end of religious killings. The world's going to cry out for peace and safety. The world's going to cry out, let's join hands together in one faith. We got to end this crazy narrative of religions battling against each other. When you combine that with a worldwide financial collapse, the world's going to be ready for the Jesuits to offer their total one world government. So I believe that World War III will be between the kings of the East, those Muslim countries fighting against Israel. So let's go one step further. So that's where we're at. Obviously, the Ottoman Empire is dried up. The kings of the East they're in place. World War I and World War II have already happened, and we're waiting on World War III. So this is exactly where we're at in the narrative, right in the middle of the 6th bowl. We're waiting on the 7th bowl. So what does the 7th bowl say? It says there's going to be a great earthquake, a great and mighty earthquake, unlike there's never been. So what does that mean? We saw an earthquake back in the Roman Empire. It meant political upheaval. Well, what's the one world government? It's going to be the mightiest and greatest political upheaval in the history of this world. What it's going to mean is that the one world government is going to control everything, and the cities and countries, the great cities of the world and countries, are going to be subservient to that. And it says that the great city is going to be split into 3. And the great city of John's day, because everything's from John's perspective, is Rome. She's telling you the great city of Rome is going to be split into 3, and we can see that. So if you look at your screen, the Jesuits control Vatican City. It's a city-state corporation. So it's its own separate country, right? And they control the religious and political leaders of the world. The Jesuits of Rome control the city-state corporation of the City of London. It's its own country inside London. and they control the financial and trade organizations of the world. So when you look at Revelation 18, and this system is destroyed, and the shipmasters and all these people are crying out that those who had empowered them and made them rich are now desolated, it's talking about this system being destroyed. So it doesn't have to be a deep sea port. It doesn't have to be a big shipping port. It's talking about the city of London where everything is traded electronically. And they own the District of Columbia, which is not part of America. It's its own city-state corporation owned by the Jesuits. And all this stuff is, I know I'm being generic here and stuff like that, but they control District of Columbia. They took control in 1871 after they had bankrupted America after the Civil Wars. They caused it to be bankrupt. They created their own city-state corporation, the District of Columbia, which is owned by the Jesuits. So here's the point. It says the great city is going to be split into three. There's your three right there. So what it's telling you is the one world government of the Jesuits is going to control the world through Vatican City, City of London, and Washington, D.C. Does that make sense?
Perfect.
Yep.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
So that's where we're at. And the end of the story, of course, you can go through all this stuff. The end of the story is, once again, in Revelation 18, it's telling the narrative of, you know what? Messiah is going to avenge the martyr's death. He's going to destroy the harlot church, Mystery Babylon. It's not going to be found anymore. Daniel 2 foretold that a stone was cut without hands would destroy the Babylonian statue. And, so we're really right here. And this will tell you, the study, when you go through the study, it's going to tell you exactly where we're at. So you can go through this whole study. It'll say, in red, we're right here. So I would advise you to read this whole thing and just kind of get this in your head. And then when you want to go verse by verse, then I provide all the verse by verse. Let me go back to the image one more time. Oops. I really don't even know where I'm at anymore. I'm delirious at this point. Someone help me. Oh my gosh, my brain hurts. There it is. Thank you. So we're right here. We're waiting. Here's the thing. And I want you to get this. I really do. So you have the parable of the 10 virgins, and you have the 5 virgins with oil, and you have the 5 virgins without oil. And here's what I'm going to tell you. Okay, the virgins without oil are the people who are believing in the futuristic deception. They're the ones who don't know scripture about the feast days of Messiah. They're the ones that don't really study the word, and they don't have the oil of the word filling their lamps. And the wise virgins, y'all, right? So what did Paul tell us? Paul told us that day Messiah is going to come back, and it's going to be a thief as in the night, right? But he said, but not for you guys. So he said, yeah, it's going to be like a thief in the night for most people. For the fullest virgins, it's going to be like a thief in the night because they're not expecting it, because they don't know when he's coming back. They tell you that. They don't know. Could happen anytime. But the wise virgins, so Paul goes on to tell you, but you're not like that. You're not going to be caught off surprise. You're not going to be caught by surprise by the thief coming to your house at night, because you guys know the truth. And so here's what I want you to pay attention to is, now you guys can go through this study. And you can see that when these people are telling you these stories about the Antichrist beast, the earth beast, when they're telling you about the seals and the trumpets and the bowls, when they're telling you about the 2 witnesses, when they're making up all these stories about something happening in the future, they're already in the past. There is no future 70th week of Daniel. There is no 7-year tribulation. There is no preacher of rapture. There is no 3.5 years of great tribulation. There's not much left between when Messiah returns. Now, when that could be, I don't know. But here's the wisdom of the virgins, and I won't go into the study because we're at 2 hours now. But Messiah told us, if you know the holy feast days, then you know that what Messiah is doing is fulfilling his Father's 7 holy feast days. He's fulfilled 4, right? Passover is the Passover lamb, first fruits, right? Because he rose again. Feast of unleavened bread because he was without sin. He poured out the Spirit at Pentecost. So those are the 3 spring feasts, the summer feasts, and now we have the 3 fall feasts. And he's coming back on the Feast of Trumpets. So we know the narrative of the Feast of Trumpets represents his return. The Day of Atonement will be pouring out vengeance and atonement. And then day 15, which would be the Feast of Tabernacles, he's going to marry his bride. So we know where we're at on the Revelation fulfillment timeline. We know when Messiah is going to return, and that's in the fall. I'm not saying this fall. I'm just saying we know the context of his return, and that's the Feast of Trumpets. So we're not like the foolish virgins, right? We're not waiting on a 7-year tribulation. We're not waiting for a temple to be rebuilt. We're not waiting on all these things to happen. We know where we're at, and we know in the context of Messiah's return. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
No,
Absolutely.
no. Thank you, David.
But go through the study, print the study. I mean, it'll. I know it's a lot to take in, and if you've never, like I said, if you've never studied the seals and trumpets being historical and all this stuff, I mean, it kind of seems like it's not real. But when you go through those videos and you go through the verse by verse explanations, you can't mistake it. You can't mistake the 5th and 6th trumpet being fulfilled. I mean, it's so precise. It's so perfect. It's a direct match. And then the takeaway is Messiah has been very active in his church, working through individuals, working through Martin Luther, working through people to carry out his perfect plan. He's been busy, and he's looking for people to use in this end time. So he hadn't been sitting around, right? So what questions
right.
what questions do you guys have about any of that? You want me to go over it again?
No. The only question that I would have is that when the little book, the Bible became printed, why wasn't Yahuwah's name written in there? I mean, I don't know how to explain it. His true name written in there.
Yeah, I and I look at that and I go, I don't know if they could have. I don't know. I mean, I can't answer obviously, but I don't know if they weren't ready for it. I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, all I can look at is, because there's people today that say, well, if you're not saved in the name of Yahuwah or Yahusha, then you're not saved. And you look at the Church of Philadelphia, and he had nothing bad to say about this church, and they were distributing Bibles and they were preaching the name of Jesus. So if he's saying that church is legit and okay, and they were using the name of Jesus, guess what?
That was an answer to my prayer tonight, because I've been seeking that, and as soon as you start explaining that, that was just like, okay. So I've had a hard time with that too.
Well, I think what I would answer it is I think Messiah, I just know this is true because you guys are here and I see it all over Facebook. Messiah is coming back soon, and he is returning us to ancient paths. So we're going to call him by his proper names. We're going to observe the feast days, when we're with him. We're going to go through all that stuff. So he's returning us back to all those things. Why that didn't get poured out through Luther and all those people? Well, here's the problem. They did what they were supposed to do, but they didn't come out of the church. They didn't come out of the Roman church enough, right? So they came out enough to print the words. They came out enough to be saved, but they didn't come out enough. They didn't go all the way back to when, right here, the Church of Pergamos, which is the falling away. They didn't go back far enough to go before that to restore the church back to the holy feast days, to restore the church back to the proper names. So all I can tell you is we're extremely blessed to know what we know, because those people didn't know it, and I can't explain it. But I don't for a minute believe that they weren't saved because they didn't know the proper name. That's just ludicrous. Messiah knows your heart no matter what. So he knows the intent of your heart. He knows that you were saved because you believe in the Messiah. And despite the name you were saved by, he knows what your heart is like. That's all that matters. Right?
Absolutely.
So, but having said that,
great study, David. Thank you.
Having said that, what's ironic now is I tell people, here's the true names, and now they have a little bit of accountability. So, sorry, but, now you can stand before Messiah and you were exposed to the true name and you didn't choose to pursue it. Maybe they'll get a I mean, they're accountable now, right? So, I can't explain it. But they didn't know a lot of stuff, I mean, they didn't know everything. It's overwhelming. I mean, look at what we know. Look at what I just went over. Everything we've ever been taught is a lie. I mean, everything about prophecy we've been taught is a lie. Everything we've been taught really about Christmas and Easter is a lie. The names, were wrong. I mean, so most of what we've been taught is a lie. So it's overwhelming. So maybe, I don't know, What other questions?
Well, I just wanted to say that I'm really beginning to understand the book of Revelation is a layered war manual. It just made a lot more sense to me tonight going through all this.
Yeah, like I said, read the study, it'll reinforce it. But now you see that, I mean, the major thing with me and why I drew it up and then I created this is you can see the overlay. You can see all the things, like the Thyatira means ruled by a woman. There's the woman right there. It's the harlot church. Here's the escaping one. They're escaping the harlot church. I mean, here's Smyrna because they're dying because they're being killed by the Roman Empire. I mean, you just see this stuff. And then here we are wretched and miserable, naked, poor, and blind. Well, why are we that way? It's because of all the deceptions of the Jesuits. They've overwhelmed the system with all their false narrative that it's almost, flat out, you need the Spirit in you to discern anything. Because at this point, if you don't have the Spirit working in you and you're not pursuing truth, and I posted this the other day, about Solomon searching it for hidden treasure and for silver and all that stuff. I mean, if you're not searching for truth and if you're not teachable and you don't have the Spirit in you, then you're almost blinded,
Exactly.
And here's what I pray, and I don't know if you guys notice this, but on the bottom of every one of my websites is a prayer. And you guys can pray this for the people, but it's on the bottom of the website. And it just says, Yahuwah, I pray that you bind Satan, his demons, and his spirits and cast them away from this website and from the visitors of this website. I pray that you grant the visitors of this website eye salve, because that's what in the Church of Laodicea, he says, I counsel you to buy from me gold and eye salve. So give them eye salve to see the truth, that they would repent and be your witnesses. I pray this in the name of your beloved Son, Yahushua Messiah. So that's my prayer for everybody. I mean, very few people see it, and I can't explain it, and I can't. It frustrates me to no end to have, this document where I can explain all of Revelation. So the best thing you can do for people is, send them to the generic study we went through. If they want to try to get it, it's a lot to take in. I don't know how to, how do you soften it? You can't.
Right.
So that was a lot. That was a lot.
Did a good job.
Oh my gosh, my brain hurts. But
Did a very good job.
But hopefully, I mean, the main goal, like I said, is just the big picture. I'm just such a and to let you know, on the study list on end time deceptions, there's an 8-page PDF that kind of summarizes the same things. There's a 4-page PDF of Daniel 9 and 12, so it shows you the prophecy in Daniel 9 and then how it was fulfilled through the prophecy of Daniel 12. There's a study on 2 Thessalonians. These are all PDFs. You can print those up, so those are key things. And then right here, I would print this too. So this is the 1-page document, and what this does, it takes a different approach. It goes through the chapters. So it just says chapter 2 it's these churches fulfilled during this time. Chapter 3 is these churches fulfilled during this time. And then Revelation 6, here's the first seal, second seal, so it goes through the seals. Revelation 8, here's the trumpets. Revelation 9, here's the trumpets. Revelation 12, 13, that's, the beast, the bowls. Here we are. So it tells you, here's the unclean spirits, here's the rise of the kings of the east. Here we are. Here's what we're waiting for. We're waiting for Armageddon. We're waiting for World War III, the New World Order to be formed, and all that. So that's a great 1-pager that really helped me keep things straight in my mind as I was going through this. I would print that up too, because it just kind of reinforces the simple answers of things. Oh, yeah. And I know that Misty is working on putting on my, in case you don't know, so if you're on this study right here, you can click on the print PDF button, and you can either print it in a really nice formatted study, just like that, looks great, or you can click on the PDF, and you can download the PDF. You just click download, and it'll save it to your download file, and you just generated a PDF of that study. So you can create a PDF of any of my studies, but I've saved all those. I've saved every PDF off of all my websites, and I'm getting them to Misty. She's going to put them into, I think, 4 different books. You'll have one on Endtimes Deceptions, one on the falling away of 2 Thessalonians 2, one on Islam and Bible prophecy, and then one on Revelation Timeline Decoded. So you have a printed version.
Yep.
So, and then also she's going to load those PDFs onto a USB drive, so that you have PDFs in one place on a USB drive. You can plug it into your computer and access them easily anytime. So when they're organized. So
Yes, because just FYI, it's like almost 1,000 pages. So for us to print that out would be incredible.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I really appreciate that.
So yeah, thank Missy for doing all that. I totally appreciate her taking on that charge, and it offloads stuff off of me. I have a lot of things. I'm still, and just to let you know, when you read through Revelation Timeline Decoded, when you read through the PDFs, whatever, that's still a work in progress. I'm not done with the website. It's probably got some spelling errors or whatever, but it's, the core is there. That's what you need. So that's it.
Perfect.
Great, thank you.
Oh, absolutely. Let me cue this off.